Hey friends, I'm Jeffrey Rickman. This is PlainSpoken. This is a podcast that I started just kind of to see if it would work out, and it's kind of working out. And so I've done a lot of things. I interview a lot of people, a lot of interesting people, a lot of people smarter than me. This is going to be part of a series that I've started where I'm talking to people in other denominations, trying to make sense of what happened in the United Methodist Church. If you don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Rickman. I came out of the United Methodist Church. I'm a global Methodist pastor now, elder. And I'm happy to serve in that capacity, but a lot of my audience is still in the United Methodist Church because they're not letting a lot of local churches disaffiliate at this point, depending on what annual conference they're a part of. And then a lot have gotten out, and they're in independent churches or they're in global Methodist churches, but they're carrying a lot of damage of the past, and they're still not sure they understood what exactly happened and how to make sense of the past so that they can navigate the present and the future well. So I just think it's really important to talk to people in other traditions about what their tradition has gone through, what the commonalities are. I think a lot of the same forces impact different institutions, but there's also a lot of differences. So I've talked with David Roseberry most recently, who came out of the Episcopal Church, and he's ACNA now. And I've spoken with Ryan Turnipseed, who just got kicked out of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I've spoken with Richard Ackerman of the PCUSA, and Dean Wheeler of the ELCA, and then Jamie Bambrick of the Anglican Church. So it's a good series. You should check it out. But today I'm going to be joined by my old seminary friend. I have one seminary friend left other than my wife, and it's Irene Willis Hassan. Back in the day, she was just Irene Willis. She and I, since we both saw each other in person and graduated and went our separate ways, she joined the UCC, I joined the UMC, or I'd been part of it, and she'd been part of the UCC. We'll get her story here in a second. We both got married, both have been in ministry for over a decade at this point. She's in Hawaii. I'm in Oklahoma. We met in Boston. We've both been all over the place. So we've just kind of been able to keep contact with one another, and we just check in every now and again. And she's been a good, firm friend over the years, just to kind of keep me in check and remind me of who I used to be. And I'd like to think I've been a good friend to her. So we finally put something together on here where she's going to speak to her time in the United Church of Christ. And if you don't know what they're about, you're about to. So this is Irene, everybody. This is my good friend, Irene. Irene, say hey to all my friends.
Hello.
Let's just go ahead and give them a basic introduction to who you are. Tell them, I already told them you're in Hawaii and that you're UCC, but, well, actually, you have a really great origin story. So I didn't ask you beforehand, but would you be willing to tell a little bit about how you came into the church as a young lady, and then just go as far as you want with it, and then I'll turn it to the UCC at some point.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here,
Oh, sure.
and it's an honor to be with you. I'm really excited that your podcast is doing so well, and I pray that it's helpful for strengthening the kingdom and Jesus's purpose for us. So I'm Irene, and I grew up in a UCC church, which meant absolutely nothing to me at the time. At the UCC church, I learned how to smoke cigarettes. I learned what sex was when I was like 11 or 12. I learned all the bad things, and I don't remember hearing anything about Jesus once. That church, God bless them. Like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? But yeah, when I was 15, I became pregnant, and that church had put me through. The UCC has something called OWL, it's Our Whole Lives, which is a sexual education program. And that church had put me through that sex ed program. But then when I was a pregnant 15-year-old with them, they had no idea what to do. They said, call the social, call the doctor, but they couldn't figure out how to just love me through that. So what I ended up doing was I ended up getting nurtured by Mormons, actually. Is a Mormon ward took me in and loved me through that experience. And even to the point of I ended up having an abortion, which is a whole different story and not something that I'm terribly proud of. But Jesus forgives us and saves us, right? But so after that happened, the Mormon church still stayed with me and loved me through it. I wasn't really sure I understood a whole lot about Mormonism. It seemed pretty bizarre to me, to be honest. So after that, things got increasingly worse, 2 steps back, and I ended up going into a women's group home for bad girls when I was 16. And in that group home, I really struggled, and I ended up being homeless for a little while after that. And a evangelical church, no, it wasn't denominational, it was Foursquare. A Foursquare church ended up taking me in, and I lived with a family, and that's where I finally found Jesus, was with the Foursquare church, because evangelicals are so good about knowing their true purpose, which is to save people and bring them to Christ and the saving power of Christ. And so they did that for me, and it was wonderful. But then me as a 17-year-old, within 2 weeks of that happening, they said, well, now we need you to say that Jesus is the only way to God. Otherwise, you're going to hell and you can't be in our church. And I said, well, I'm 17 and I just learned about all this. Can you give me a little more time? I said, no. So then I was homeless, and so I'm trying to make this story short. But,
no, it's so interesting. And I just know that a lot of people in my audience have actually known young ladies like you describing yourself, and just to see you at this point in your life is going to be so encouraging and hard. So this is perfect. So take your time. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. And I assume you can edit down whatever you need to edit down.
I'm not going to cut this out. Keep going.
So I ended up finding a job at an ice cream shop and saving up some money. And I really just wanted to go back to New Orleans, which is where that group home was for troubled young women. I didn't have a reason for that. I was just like, that's the only place I ever felt nurtured and loved, I guess. And I guess I just want to go back to New Orleans. So I saved up money for a plane ticket. And at this point, the Jesus stuff had taken a back burner because the Foursquare church had told me I was going to hell. I was like, well, okay, I guess that didn't work out. But I knew that I'd experienced God somehow, and I was still trying to understand it. Anyway, I was planning on going back to New Orleans, maybe sleeping behind a strip club and stripping. I had no idea what I was planning on doing in New Orleans. But I knew that my 18th birthday was August 27th, 2005. And that on my 18th birthday, I could buy a ticket and I could go wherever I wanted. No one could tell me differently. So I bought a plane ticket for my birthday. And then my mother called me, and she was just at this point did not know what to do with me after all the drugs and the pregnancy and the outbursts and the arrests and whatever. And she was like, can you just come talk to me with a counselor? I'll give you $200 if you just come talk to me with a counselor. Like, oh, money, sweet. Yeah, of course I'll come talk to you for some money. So I sat there and I listened to my mom cry, and the counselor, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I want my money so I can go on to New Orleans. And then I heard a voice in my head that it was different than anything I'd ever heard. It said, stop, you're going to die. And I stopped. I was like, oh, what do you want me to do? And I wasn't really sure who I was talking to at that point. And my mom was like, oh, okay, thank God. I want you to stay here and live with us and go to community college. I was like, I'm not sure what's talking to you. But okay, I guess that's the answer. And I guess that's what I'm doing. So I didn't get on the plane on my birthday. And the next day, on August 28th, 2005, Katrina destroyed the city of New Orleans, and I would have been homeless there. So I probably would have died, or something very bad would have happened. So God saved my life, and I have dedicated all the rest of my life to God subsequently. So I went to undergraduate school and seminary trying to understand this experience that I had, basically, and wanting to save others using that experience too. People that were traumatized, people that were broken, because I think that's really the power of Christianity that is unique and important, is that Jesus reaches into people's souls and forgives them and makes them new and transforms them. Jesus overcame death and shows us the way to do so too. Amen. So that's what I wanted to do. And so I thought maybe I wanted to be a military chaplain, because there's a lot of, trauma and moral injury in the military. I ended up not doing that for reasons I can't get into, but I'm trying to make this brief. But I did end up having a career working with people who were traumatized and walking with them spiritually and helping them understand their narrative of where they've been, where they are, and where God's leading them in the future. I've worked in homeless ministry. I did that for my internship in Boston. And then I've been the chaplain for homeless services here on Oahu since 2017. I was the professional one until 2020. And now I just volunteer because I care about it so much. And I spent some time in the Middle East helping build refugee schools out there. I just wanted to be anywhere where people's stories were being transformed and helping lead them into where God was calling them. And now I'm at a local church called Kailua Christian Church, which is a really lovely little community of people that are very centered on Jesus and what Jesus is calling them into being. And that's sort of how I got from A to B.
It's a crazy story, and I was making fun of you before we got started because you don't have many books behind you in your bookshelves, but it's because you've been on the move a lot of your life, and even in recent years, like you've kept things moving. I've kind of settled. I never thought I would settle. I've always kind of been a rolling stone, but not like you. And yeah, you've got what you need. And then I get the impression. I mean, you've been there since you said 2017.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, I took a brief hiatus to Cleveland, which is where UCC National Ministries is. I was
Yeah,
called
that's
to
right.
be, the refugee and migration minister there for 2 years, which I can talk about. It was an interesting experience, but I'm happy here at my local church. So yeah, a lot of moving around.
There's a lot of questions I imagine viewers might have, and that honestly, I mean, I thought I'd heard your full story, but I hadn't, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't just sit down with you at one point and say, I need to make sure I know your full story. But I mean, what's clear is that you've seen the dysfunction of the local church, you've seen the dysfunction of mainline churches, upper class churches with Rob Henderson calls them luxury beliefs, where they'll do the new curriculum that's edgy for the youth, but then once like one actually gets pregnant, they're like, what do we do? You've seen a lot of this kind of phoniness and the ways in which empty words don't always meet the ground with real people. But then you've also seen the living Lord and the way that true transformation works. You saw the way you told your story. The UCC is what you were raised in, and it was not at all up to the task of escorting you into the presence of the divine. You found that in other traditions, or facets of that in other traditions. I'm not sure I heard you tell why it was you came back to the UCC and have chosen to spend your time serving Jesus within that body.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was educated by Methodists all the way through. I went to a Methodist undergraduate school, Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, go Majors, and then Boston University, which is also Methodist. So I have a great appreciation for Methodism. Millsaps actually made me do a dissertation. They make everyone do a dissertation, which I thought was wild for an undergraduate. But so my dissertation was on John Wesley. So I have a lot of appreciation for Methodism, and I almost went Methodist. But the UCC is where I was raised, and I see a lot of potential in it. In that I really like congregationalism. So the history of the UCC is that we were called the Congregationalists for most of the existence of our strain, right? Which means that every local church is autonomous and there is no hierarchical structure of belief. It was built from Christian tradition coming out of the Protestant Revolution called just the Christians, where they just believed six things, which were just basically that Jesus is the Son of God and take the sacraments. I forgot what all six of the things were, but it was meant to be super simple without all of the pomp and circumstance of bishops and elders and stuff like the Methodists and the Episcopalians and so forth have.
Is that the Restorationists?
No, they were called literally just the Christians.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that's what the Restorationists were about, but maybe there were. Okay. Keep going. Because I was looking at the Wikipedia for the UCC before this, and it is the confluence of all these different traditions at different points in history. Okay, you have just the Christians who have their six basic things that unite them. You have Congregationalism, which. Okay, you've talked about these two traditions, and then keep going.
So Congregationalism, again, is just every church is autonomous. Like the UCC national body can say, we're all flamingos. That's what we identify as. And my local church could say, no, we're polar bears. And we could still be UCC. Right. So that's sort of why I like it, is that I don't have a bishop or anyone above me that can tell my local church what to do or what to believe. And the only reason why we're all united is because well, originally it was because we all believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and we want to be in covenant with each other and keep talking with each other about how we live out our faith in that way, but without having power over each other. So I liked the quality and structure, and I saw, and so I said, this could really be a wonderful thing if the UCC itself wasn't in, if the UCC wasn't the way it is. But no human structure is perfect. The Methodists aren't perfect. The Episcopalians aren't. We all fall short of His glory, right? So yeah. Oh, the other two strains. So there's technically 4 strains, and it's the Christians, the Congregationalists, the Reformed, and the Evangelical. And the only one that, sorry, this harkens back to my seminary days. The Reformed branch, basically that was just grabbing all of the Germanic Congregationalist churches that were out in the Great Plains area. I think that's basically what that was. We still have a Reformed conference within the UCC. The UCC, in particular in Hawaii, is very, very different from the UCC in the mainland. So the Congregationalists are the ones that they were the primary missionaries to Hawaii and the Pacific. So Micronesia, Samoa. So most of the original missionary churches, in fact, pretty much all of them, the original missionary churches of the Pacific Islands are all Congregationalists. Really? And the plot here is very different because it's based on that and the history of that, rather than on this woo-woo rainbow flag protest stuff that the mainland uses.
So some of the people watching this aren't going to know because I didn't tell you. And Irene is in covenant with these folks and is not going to be like super excited to like just name things that I would dog them for pretty easily because I've done it with the Methodists. But the UCC, is one of the 7 mainline sisters who have all gone woke left except for the American Baptist, and that's only sort of. So the UCC was out way ahead of the UMC in this, and they really have gone to that extreme. Something I didn't know until I was reading through the Wikipedia page was there was a 2001 study showing, and maybe things have gone further, well, they almost certainly have gone further left since then, but at that point, there was a very even spread between far left, far right, moderate left, moderate right, and you've given me the impression that the church you serve there is not at all part of this woke progressive left, and they've still been able to stay somewhat comfortable within the UCC because of this Congregationalist polity where they've got to leave y'all alone. Did I understand you right?
Correct.
Yeah. And just so my audience is clear about where you are, what I would say, and you and I haven't gotten into every single issue, but I would probably just say Irene is her own creature. There are some things about her that align pretty clearly left. There are some other things that actually align pretty firmly right. And then there are some things that just don't even fit on that continuum. And that's, of course, true for most people in some ways, but you really are kind of your own creature. But do you think that I've pegged you right there? Do you think that's a fair characterization of where you sit personally?
Fair characterization. This is one thing I appreciate about you, Jeff, is you're very intuitive.
I don't know. I just, anyway, whatever. I do what I do and it works out. But so you are in this denomination. Here's the similar things between the UMC and the UCC for people following along. Both started off as legitimate, this is me using my words now, I'm not speaking for Irene, as legitimate religious traditions aimed at the gospel of Jesus Christ and focusing on fundamental components of a biblical faith. But over time, concerns of first respectability and comfort, but then later like actually appeasing like worldly elites, sold out a lot of its heritage in order for the message, the global liberalization, freedom, freedom from all constraint, and just high extreme individualism, letting people be whatever they want to be without shame or guilt. And that's something that took over the United Methodist Church, and something that also at the top, well, this is one of the commonalities. People on the ground in both groups seem to still have some common sense and have some kind of loyalty to like, hey, that's not what the Bible says. There are limits. But at the top of both denominations, people took over that are on board with this kind of global liberalism project. And they used a biblical concept called ecumenism, which is, we're all Christians of God's household, and we all should be aiming for Christian unity. Both of those movements formed by combining with other bodies, but then people taking over at the top, dragging the whole new federal body left. And so in the United Methodist Church, that happened most recently in 1968 with the union of the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren, and I want to say the Methodist Protestant Church. It's been a while since that happened. But Irene has just she's described a similar confluence of different bodies in the early to mid 20th century that accomplished kind of the same thing. Do you see that, Irene, as I describe that broadly, do you think that it's the same phenomena that really informed both movements, or do you think that there were things that were unique about the UCC that kind of separated it from some of those forces that we saw in the United Methodist Church?
No, I think that your description of all of these major seven traditions is accurate. And I was thinking about that on my drive here. Is like, what happened to the UCC that made it worship liberalism instead of Jesus? I don't understand, because it's such a good model congregation, in my opinion. I love congregationalism. Yet it's so far left. And so for the UCC, I think what happened is that like I said, we're Congregationalists, we're not bogged down by this huge bureaucratic structure that a lot of other denominations have. And so we can move quickly with new ideas, right? And so someone says, hey, I think I'd really like to ordain a woman, or hey, I'd really like to ordain a gay person, or something like that. It can be quickly moved up to the top and brought back down and said, yes, this is something that we encourage all of you to do. So I think that the speed in which we're able to move is what sort of caused the UCC to head so far left so early in the game. Can't speak for the Methodists. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts.
It's a very different polity in the Methodist. Of course, it's an Episcopal setup, which is the opposite of Congregationalism. There's all kinds of interference from above. The Global Methodists are trying to do it somewhat different. It's kind of a hybrid polity, and we'll see how it works out when the rubber hits the road. Well, it's happening right now. So far, so good. But in the Methodist Episcopal Church, high Episcopal authority, local churches are largely seen as instruments of the larger corporate denomination. And that works well when the denomination and movement is high and mighty and doing really well, and everybody's taking pride in that. But from the year of its inception, the United Methodist Church was in decline. And that's another commonality between the UCC and the UMC is when the UCC was formed, I think I saw that it had 2 million members. It's down to 750,000 roughly, I think, last count. And then the United Methodist Church is similarly a fraction of its former self. As people like me would say, well, yeah, that tracks with selling out your birthright and your theology. Other people just say it's demographics, and that's the age we're living in. But within Methodism, there's this concept of connectionalism, where we're all in covenant, not just with people in our local church, but more broadly with one another. And so the doctrine that we all share impacts us. And the tapestry of our common shared theological fabric speaks to us. So right now, what a lot of United Methodist churches are going through is, since the General Conference of the UMC took it so far left, all of a sudden, a lot of these local churches are going, can we maintain any kind of relationship with this larger body, knowing that our covenant relationship, they impact us. We cannot maintain our integrity. Can we maintain our integrity if we're still tied to them? And so what people are hearing from you is, okay, well, at least in the UCC, we don't have that same sense of what the larger body does automatically impacts our integrity. We can maintain our own integrity and even maintain our affiliation with them without being stained by them. That's the impression I've got from what you've said so far.
Right. I think a lot of my church members would disagree. I have several church members that really just don't want us to be in the UCC because of what they do out at National, at which I remind them, we are an autonomous body. It does not matter what they do. So there is something there. But
why, this will be a short question, why be UCC and not just an independent church?
Because Well, first of all, resources. So I have 3 interns living in my church who are all seminary students. One's from Boston University, and
Cool.
yeah, and so I was describing some of the reason for a denomination is so that you have access to resources and support. So we're building a new thing. We started a contemporary worship service here using the seminary students, and the HCUCC, which is the Hawaii Conference of the UCC, paid for a lot of it, and sends over different pastors and congregations to come help us build it over here. And without that denominational structure of having the support and the resources, and a UCC person trained me about how to take care of these seminary students, right? So that's why we stay connected. Yeah.
Resources. Yeah. So within the United Methodist Church, whenever I started letting my not liberal flag fly, there were denominational resources in the United Methodist Church. There was what was called a US2 program where interns could get assigned to churches and stuff. And there were church planting dollars and innovative ministry stuff. And what was found is, oh, shucks, there's just not enough money in interns to go around. But there's enough for all the progressive churches. And so they were kind of, it wasn't over hostile towards conservatives, but it was just kind of like a choking out sort of thing. And of course, that's not a perfect metaphor because generally speaking, right-leaning congregations are more vital and dynamic and have more resources. But even so, in the UMC at least, before things took an official swing left, there was an unofficial swing left where if you were right-leaning, you really couldn't expect too much institutional support. You've already given the strong impression that the UCC has no way of disfellowshipping a church that falls out of favor with its elite leadership. Are there mechanisms that they have for making it clear to right-leaning congregations that they really better should move along?
Yeah, so our conferences can do that, but I find that's often, and I imagine this isn't unique to the UCC. This is humans being human. Is that if there is a congregation or a pastor that has fallen out of standing, they do what's called like a fitness review, and put a formal stamp on that pastor or that church's biography, explaining that they're not in line with UCC general polity, and this is usually administered by every conference instead of from UCC National. So yeah, that definitely does happen, and when that does happen, sometimes good for good reasons, sexual abuse, financial abuse. But it recently happened to one of my fellow conservative pastors. We're all part of a network of UCC churches called Faithful and Welcoming, which means the conservative churches: evangelical, conservative, Orthodox, and traditional. And there's we're a fairly small group compared to
the name for this conglomeration of conservative UCC pastors is Faithful and Welcoming.
That's right. Why?
Really? Well, because welcoming kind of is like code for like bring in all the gay people that you can. Like we don't care about who you are, bring them all in. I mean, within the UMC, that was code for, the conservatives are really mean. They don't want you to come in if you're not already perfect or whatever. They got this caricature. And so welcoming is what they associated with themselves, So to have conservatives within a body say, we want to be associated with the word welcoming. That's kind of like a conservative group sort of like making a flag for themselves with a rainbow on it, where we're taking it back from the people who co-opted it. Was that the intention in putting that in the name, or was it just like, yeah, of course we're welcoming? Why wouldn't we be?
I have no idea. You'd have to ask to the leadership of that. I'm just a member.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It was just such an interesting, it's called Faithful and Welcoming, and it's a coalition of non-conformist conservatives, at least by UCC standards.
That's right.
I kind of hedged it a little bit more than you did, but keep telling us about them.
Well, so, God help me if I'm telling a story that isn't mine to tell. I think it's okay. I'll leave names out. But this other pastor that's in our Faithful and Welcoming network, when the Israel-Palestine war started, he started sending out email letters to all the UCC church, many UCC churches, including mine, explaining his support for Israel and explaining why he believed that Israel, the good guys, except whatever, and saying that the UCC nationally needs to be more balanced about their approach to this. And I went back, and this particular situation, Israel Palestine, I'm pretty far left on, although I respect it or not. But I wrote back and I said, I disagree, but I support your ability and your opinion, and your right to talk in covenant with other people about your disagreement. So power to you, friend. And I left it at that. And then he wrote back a little while later saying, I've been put under fitness review for writing these letters. And so I wrote his conference. Actually, I wrote the people that made the decision, and I said, you can't put someone under fitness review for not having the same opinion as you. That's everything that we're all about as Congregationalists, is our autonomy and being able to have conversations with each other about differences. Like, that's exactly why we're Congregationalists. So why did you do that? And they never responded to me. So yeah.
So within the PCUSA, Presbyterian Church USA, which of course is its foundations are very conservative, staunch Calvinist, they went through these same social forces that led them very far left. And at their most recent, I forget if they call it a synod or a conference or whatever, the denominational gathering, there was legislation that was put forward to effectively remove all of the conservative clergy from the denomination. And so Richard Ackerman and several others were very kind of anxious about this because any kind of conservative resurgence without clergy is almost impossible. Not entirely, but almost. So they, I think, were able to stave that off for another few years till their next gathering. Within the United Methodist Church, of course, there is nothing saying conservatives have to leave. They've still got this rhetoric of, it's a big tent, we can make room for everybody. But you've got mutually exclusive worldviews here where in each of the worldviews, the other is causing other people to sin and causing harm. So it's a lot of people are acting like there's a tenable unity. But as we're watching these things advance, also within the Episcopal Church, and all the mainline denominations, and even within larger evangelical consumer culture now, we're seeing that it's just really hard, if not impossible, for people to all stay together. The picture you're painting is that there's a congregational polity that makes it possible, where there's just enough distance between each other, where you're not necessarily at each other's throats or trying to file charges against each other or do fitness reviews on people. But the anecdote you just told me leads me to think that maybe there is a growing intolerance of right-leaning people within the UMC or UCC. But would that be an overstatement? Because this is just one anecdote. That definitely doesn't equal a trend, does it?
I mean, I think that it's true that conservative people feel marginalized within the UCC. I think again, you'd have to ask the founders of Faithful and Welcoming, but I think the reason for the way that they've framed it, Faithful and Welcoming, is to say, hey, we're not your enemy, please don't be mean to us. I think that's the purpose of that.
We're saying the word. We're saying the magic words. We're welcoming too. Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. So yeah, we're going to code left but still be right. Would you leave us alone, please? And then the answer kind of, okay, so there within the United Methodist Church is this guy named Lonnie Brooks who's in Alaska, and I really like him. He's a centrist. He leans kind of right on some things, but he's on the gay question, he's left. But he published an article a year and a half ago before the UMC went left, just saying, okay, when the left gets its way and the conservatives leave, the progressives are going to turn on the moderates at that point, because the whole ideology depends upon having an enemy to mobilize against, and the enemy in our midst is a galvanizing force. I read just a little bit on the UCC's Wikipedia page about activism, political activism within the UCC, but I didn't read much about, okay, so a lot of denominations will petition publicly for certain public goods, but the UMC had a lot of petitioning at our congregational, denominational gatherings and stuff, like marches and signs and slogans and stuff. Has that been part of the culture of the UCC, where there's groups agitating for certain legislative measures to be on the right side of history?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say that's probably like 75% of what happens at the UCC national offices is doing this legislative advocacy for liberal causes, which really just breaks my heart because
Mm.
I understand that and empathize that the UCC feels like they're following Jesus and that they think Jesus was a liberal, but we're taking Jesus out of his own context by doing that, equating him to American liberalism today. So it just seems like you've lost sight of Jesus and his saving power and what he actually said by putting words in his mouth to make him fit the agenda of what's happening today. But to answer your question, yeah, that's very central to what UCC National does and what a lot of UCC churches do. Our church does not. We don't participate in any sort of protests or legislative lobbying. This church in particular is extremely intentional about who loving anybody despite their political affiliation and believing that all people are capable of turning towards Jesus and laying themselves down at the cross for him. So
there's, I mean, here's the thing that Methodists are, I think a lot of Methodists in particular, so I'm going to be thinking of those who, so anybody can walk away from the United Methodist Church at any time, like they're not enslaved. But whether or not they should walk away from their buildings and assets is the question, and how much their personal integrity and their faith is on the line as they maintain a relationship with the United Methodist Church. One of the things that really wounded me as a United Methodist pastor was we would watch the General Conference, which was our largest denominational gathering every 4 years, where there was all kinds of activism and rhetoric about, hateful conservatives and them being on the right side of history and us, holding them back and causing gay kids to kill themselves. But even at the annual conference level, there were all kinds of social resolutions for adoption that would show sympathy for the political left. And it just felt like the ones in authority had us in lockstep with the far left wing of the Democratic Party. And so it's just a really toxic thing to participate in anything outside of the local church. We might have a local church that was healthy, but then there were expectations that we engage in an overseer, a district superintendent, or a bishop that would then coax us into larger participatory events where it was just clear that they disdained us. So I'm wondering if it feels exactly the same for conservative congregations in the UCC, or if you think that conservative congregations have been able to maintain more of a separation so that they're just like, yeah, they're wacky, but they can't touch us. We're fine.
No, I think that we experienced the same tension as conservative congregations of the UCC. I wasn't at this synod. I think I was probably too young, but I was told that the Faithful and Welcoming group, a resolution, which sounds like you just have similar in the UMC, came up to our general synod, which was our largest gathering, to excommunicate the conservative churches and get rid of Faithful and Welcoming. And the president of the UCC at the time said, "No, we're not even going to bring that one to the floor. That's not who we are." But the sentiment was there and it was felt. And the fact, and when I started this program that I'm doing, like I said, I have a seminary program here where we're training seminary students, and they're helping us build contemporary programs. And so when I went to apply for funding from the UCC National, and start having conversations with seminaries, UCC National sent me a pretty wild letter, just telling me to kind of go saw it off, in almost those words. Like it was a very rude letter, and I just did not understand where it was coming from. And it feels like it's because they asked us, "Well, what's your mission?" It's like, "Oh, to save souls and bring them to Christ." But that seemed like very conservative, right?
Sure. Yeah, that code's conservative. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had two seminaries that refused to work with me. One of them was the UCC seminary, which is the Pacific School of Religion. They're one of two, the only two that said, "No, I'm not going to work with you to send you seminary students." And the other one was unfortunately Liberty University, which was really sad because I had 4 applicants from Liberty, and then Liberty pulled the plug because they looked at UCC National's website and said, "Oh, not Christian. We don't want to send our seminary students to you." I was like, "No, wait, don't judge me based on that website." So,
Dude, that'd be so nuts having Liberty interns working at a UCC church. Yeah, the That would be quite a thing. So yeah, that is too bad that it didn't work out. But you said you got 3 seminary students there. One from Boston University School of Theology?
Mhm.
According to her, is it pretty much the same place, or has there been much change?
Nope, same place.
Okay. All right. How do you remember, I don't know, we can cut this out if you don't want to, but how do you remember your time at that school?
Well, I remember actually feeling connected to you at one point because I remember there was a speaker at Marsh Chapel, and he condemned, I don't remember what he said, but had something to do with condemning gay people or something like this. And we all went down to the community room because they needed to have a crisis debrief about being triggered or whatever. And I remember you and I looking at, I don't know if you remember this, remember you and I looking at each other being like, people are going to think that. And if you can't withstand that in your career and have like a thoughtful conversation with that theology, then why are you in seminary? Why are we getting all of it?
I have zero
Yeah.
recollection of that. I really wish I remembered that. That is, I had an event in undergrad where I broke my ankle and I was on crutches for like 6 months, and I hardly remember anything from those 6 months, because they were just painful and awkward. And that's how I remember my seminary. I have just a few memories, but a lot of it is just lost to me. I'm a very different person now, but also like it was a very painful experience for me being around. I just felt like I was hated the whole time. But I remember you were one of the few people that I was like, okay, here's a real person here. And so I love that you remember that, because that is totally something that would have happened. I mean, yeah, that's a story I would concoct about them, and easily believe that was the case if I had to make something up. But you don't have to,
It's too bad
because
you don't remember it. Sorry.
No, you go on.
Oh, it's just too bad you don't remember it because you said that out loud. But I think I was the only one listening to you because everyone was, and you were just like, you need to be able to have conversations with people that believe this, because a lot of people do. And I remember like, yep.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
won't surprise my audience at all to know that I was saying those mean things to those sweet poor people. That's just kind of the reputation that I got. So I'm true to form, even if I do change a little bit over time. And that continues to be the truth. And then we leading churches, we're supposedly supposed to be equipping the saints for ministry, going out into the world to minister to people who are not them, who are not like them, who don't hold the same presuppositions as them. And it's just crazy that a lot of people in authority want to make local churches just manufacturing centers for, siloed individuals that can't consider other worldviews. So it should be plain to anybody by now that you're not one of them. I'm going to be selfish at this point. I know, well, we've only got a few minutes left anyway. I can't believe how much time has passed. Your story has put you in a unique position to minister to people quite literally on the fringes of society, very dysfunctional people in generational poverty, addiction, dysfunction. You've lived that life. You've served at a denominational high place, trying to work with people like that. You continue to work with people walking the streets today. I want to give the last few minutes for you to minister. I mean, I'm sorry, folks, if you wanted to hear more denominational stuff, I think this is more important. I think we need to know how to minister to the least and the lost and the people that are not easy. So could you preach to my audience just for a little bit about how it is that they properly should govern themselves within the local church and make room for that transformative ministry in people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of sermons on that topic. But what I basically say to churches is you already have the equipment to know how to do that without me having to tell you. And that's love. Is Jesus, Ephesians says that we are rooted in love through Christ. And that's exactly what many people in terrible positions exactly need. And that's why I'm not a social worker. It's why I'm not a doctor. Because I think because like I said, my UCC church when I was a child recommended me to all these clinical aspects. But what people who are experiencing difficulty need is someone to say, I see you and I'm going to walk with you through this. And I think it's the most valuable thing. So I encourage all of your listeners to go into the shelters and do it wrong and learn. Don't give out money because that probably will actually go to drugs and stuff like that. So build because it's two things, is knowing your boundaries and what you're there to accomplish. And so I told my interns that, because they spend half of their time at the homeless shelters working with me and helping me develop the chaplaincy there. So what I told them to do is always remember why you're there. So someone walks up to you and they say, "Oh, I really need $5 for a Diet Coke, Pastor. Can you give me $5 for a Diet Coke?" 'Cause that's like how much Diet Coke costs out here, by the way. It's very expensive.
Good night. Oh, wow.
You're like, well, I want to love this person, I want to be helpful, but that's not helpful. The person probably is going to take that $5 and go, buy something else with it, right?
Well, diet soda's not good for you anyway, but whatever. That's not the point. Go on.
Okay. Speak for yourself, Jeff. I love diet soda.
Okay. All right. Agree to disagree. I'm glad that this will be our one disagreement here in the conversation. But okay, so they're coming to you saying, give me $5. I need a soda. What do? You wanna be kind to them.
Yeah, you always want to remember why you're there. Is you have to, and this gets easier with time as you continue doing, is you have to say, how is that going to help me elevate what I'm trying to do? And what I'm trying to do is bring this person's narrative closer to God so that they become the person that they are meant to be instead of what they're doing. So is buying that person Diet Coke going to facilitate that? And if the answer is no, don't do it. And if the answer is yes, then do it. Right? Does that make sense? And that comes with prayer. It comes with yourself being centered to God so that you know who you are and why you're offering what you're offering. Yeah, I hope that is helpful.
So my next here, I'm gonna provide a question and then try to answer for you. When you were a homeless teenager running around, suffering the same shame and sorrow of a life that fell apart, and then just hopping from place to place and person to person, what was it that you needed? And the answer I think you would understand, or you would say, is just a loving community that can walk with me. Is that well? And then surely you would say Jesus needs to be at the center of that. But is that kind of the basic formula that you offer? I mean, that's a crude word to use, formula, but is that the basic setup that you would encourage churches to manifest for people?
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you already have the equipment to do it. You just need to go try it, fail, and then keep doing it and listen to God and then get better at it.
Yeah, that I've loved that grace. I mean, this is something that's really hard for churches, is we want to get everything just right before we begin anything. And that's just a silly expectation to have. And for you to just on the front end say, do it wrong. The point is that you're doing it, and then surely, I mean, you anticipate you get better at it over time as you figure out your principles and how these dynamics work. But if you never begin, and if you're never willing to make mistakes, then you're not even going to do the work that Christ has in store for you.
Right. So it's been very frustrating at the homeless shelters because all of the liberal-leaning churches just want to go in, serve a meal, not talk to anybody, and then get out. But the conservative-leaning churches go in there and they pray with people and they love on people and they take them places and do things with them, give them events like and that's sort of what won me to conservative people. Was I was like watching all these conservative churches come in there and really be present with people, be willing to do it wrong, be willing to learn, be willing to offer what exactly they knew they offered, which was Jesus. Whereas liberal churches were like, I don't have the tools for that. I got a meal. Are you changed now? That was very transformative. That soup I just made.
That was one of the things I do remember from seminary was, you had all these people saying the right things and showing the right, virtue signaling. But then we had people, seminary students from other parts of the world. Some, I remember we had one from Azerbaijan who he was just very earnest. And he would react to the content from his worldview, which of course was much more conservative. And the professor would just bite his head off. And the students just hated that guy. And then, of course, the Koreans learned to keep their heads down because they were in general, not as far left as everybody. And so you have this virtue signaling language about everybody being included and the blessed community. But then you had all of the racial, ethnic minorities really on the outs and just going, okay, I got to keep my head down so as not to offend the white liberals. And I just got to get my degree and get out of here. There's this just huge dissonance that is so, I'm just gobsmacked after years that very few people see it, that the language and intent does not at all match what you see on the ground. And so, yeah, you're not the first person, this is not the first conversation where it's been noted that, yeah, the left has all kinds of compassionate language for homeless people and dysfunctional people, but the ones who are actually doing the hard work on the ground to extend Jesus to them in a new way of life, a transformed way of life, by and large, are not at all part of that worldview. So, with you and your career where you are, is any part of your aspiration to be like a consistent vocal public image for kind of conservative Christianity within your tribe, so that they're moved to like repent and reconsider their leftward drift? Or do you think that that's just kind of a pie in the sky sort of thing, and that right now, your only aspiration is just to utilize the local church to glorify God, and the UCC can do that just fine?
Yeah, that's right. I actually, like, I've talked a lot of smack about the UCC in this conversation. At the end of the day, like, I'm not going to leave the UCC. I appreciate them, and I appreciate the quality. I appreciate a lot of the people, like the Hawaii conference of the UCC. I'm the Oahu Association president, which means that well, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It just means that I connect churches and get them together for food sometimes, and come up with brainstorming sessions, but it doesn't mean I'm an elder or have any sway over what they do. But these churches, and that's funny that you say that about minorities being like, but we're actually conservative, because Hawaii is the only predominantly, brown conference of the UCC, and is probably the most conservative. And the only other predominantly brown conference was Puerto Rico, and they left because the UCC was too liberal. So anyway, I love a lot of the people within the Hawaii conference of the UCC, and more generally, I know a lot of awesome UCC people who are very thoughtful and kind. And so please know that while I see flaw in the structure, I'm going to stay in the structure, and I don't, and I like congregationalism. So I don't know if that was your question. What
No, it was. I just think it's so, I really want, I'm trying to sympathize or empathize with other people watching this who don't know you and just are not at all familiar with how to navigate these things. I think this has been super helpful for them. And just, I mean, it's something that every individual really has to discern for themselves in every local church about how much they're going to let the larger body impact the integrity of their faith there, and if that is something that they can tolerate, So I think it's really helpful for them just to watch you in a different body, and it's really helpful for us to step outside of ourselves and look at others and then step back in. I failed to share a really interesting anecdote with you. It was when I started PlainSpoken in the beginning, and I was saying a lot of things about the United Methodist Church, and there was a man who wrote me. I couldn't even tell you his name now. But he said, I'm a gay black man in the UCC. I'm actually retired clergy. Maybe I shouldn't have said that part. But he said, it is really clear that the United Methodist Church is totally betraying the trust that they have, and that they're being completely disingenuous. And it's really good that you're saying this, because it's absolutely the case. And so it's just one of these things. I've had a number of gay people actually write me and say, we disagree about stuff, but clearly you're on to the truth here. And clearly, they think they're on the right side of history, but they're behaving despicably. And so that's just said to me that even though we have our political loyalties, there is still such a thing as right and wrong and common sense. And at least with respect to Methodism, I've been just appalled at the lack of conscience and integrity within the UMC, and I'm trying to help my new tribe, the GMC, do better. And just the larger topic of cultural leftism and the way it feels no shame at acquiring institutions that are designed for much different purposes and just repurposing them for their agenda. It seems to me that, I heard you say, you've already said enough negative stuff about the UCC, but we're just standing at this point of history where both of our institutions, one that I've left and one that you've stayed in, have largely been co-opted by this ideology aimed in a certain direction. And how do we react in the face of that? And I've reacted one way, you've reacted a different way. And first off, we can be still friends and care about each other, and that's something that the Methodists are struggling with right now. A lot who left are shaming those who have stayed, and some who stayed are shaming those who left. And that's really unnecessary. So I hope that speaks to the audience a little bit. But I also want the audience to take even forget all that conversation. It doesn't matter what tribe we're a part of if we're not doing the work of Jesus. and ministering to the least and the lost. So I guess I want people to meditate more on your personal story and then your encouragements at the end here about doing the ministry that they are all called to do. So thank you for your clarity on that. I wonder if a final blessing from you for my audience might be that you pray over them and their local churches, whether they be United Methodist or GMC or whatever, in light of that particular facet of your story.
Sure, that I would be honored to. And I just want to say thank you for inviting me on here. And also, my heart really goes out to the Methodists in whatever category that anyone calls themselves as a Methodist. I have a huge heart for Methodism. I think John Wesley was brilliant, very inspired by God. And a lot of what we're doing out here to build our contemporary services is based on Methodist revivalism because it was so... I mean, it made disciples left and right. It had the Holy Spirit's fire behind it. It was awesome. So I do pray that Methodism in whatever form gets back to that root of that fire that John Wesley had.
I'm right there. Yes. Yes. All right. Say that prayer for us.
All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together and thank you for this podcast. May it enlighten its viewers to know more about you. Lord, we know that we fall short and that we aren't always perfect, but we are trying. We are trying to reach you, to know you better so that we can be closer to you, as Jeff said, so that we decrease and you increase. Lord, we know that in one way that we can decrease ourselves is by humbly walking into those places that Jesus asks us to walk. May we be good brothers and sisters in Christ in our willingness to minister to the least of these, minister to the oppressed, and help them know that you are God and that you can transform all things, you can change all things because you are rooted in love. And Lord, I ask each person listening to be blessed by your Holy Spirit to have that fire of the original Methodism, to go forward into those places boldly, knowing that they are bringing the cause and the light of Jesus, and that is all they need, and that is enough, because God, we know that you are enough through the deliverance of your Son. So may we also believe that you are enough and go into those places to be vessels of transformation on your behalf. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, in an age where the refrain to people is "you are enough," I love that you're concluding your prayer with "Lord, you are enough." You know, we are not enough; you are. So thank you. That's a wonderful reflection, and thank you for spending time with me and my audience. It's a weird audience. We're all over the place. But friends, as you've spent time with me and Irene, I just want to thank you and ask God's blessing on you. I know that I talk to a lot of very different people, and it's hard to figure out what wavelength I'm on. And I'm not really on one. I'm just kind of bouncing around. But there's wisdom to be had from everybody and from every tradition. And so I hope you gained something from your time with Irene. Just want to remind you that this is a ministry that my church has chosen to support for the good of the larger connection. And so if you want to support my church, you can go over and find them at nowhatamethodists.org. And if you want to support me personally, you can go over to, well, I don't know which address I've got here. It's not even coming up. But you can find me at plainspoken.locals.com and be a part of that community. I have a morning worshiping community at 6:15 Central Time. So if you ever want to be part of that, just go over to plainspoken.locals.com. So anyway, I just appreciate everybody who's a part of this project. I love that the channel continues to grow and that people generally find these things worthy, and we'll see where we go from here. But I would encourage you, once this ends, say a prayer for Irene and her ministry over in Hawaii, and for those interns that are getting this real world experience. And then also, you might consider what your local church can do for the least and lost where you are. So may you be blessed in doing so. Irene, one more time, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.